Hey, welcome back to our coverage here on the Wisconsin Live Desk. The second day of testimony now in the trial of Milwaukee County Judge Hannah Dugan, who is charged with two different counts, a misdemeanor and a felony when it comes to concealing an individual to prevent arrest and obstruction, the events surrounding the arrest of Eduardo Flores Ruiz back in April of this year. We're trying to bring you a number of different voices and perspectives through the course of this trial. We just had our Ted Perry inside the courthouse this morning on what's actually happening on the witness stand. We're joined now by the Sheriff for Dodge County, Dale Schmidt, who was kind enough to join us on Wake Up yesterday, kind of setting the stage for the trial, and rejoining us here on the Wisconsin Live Desk today. And Sheriff Schmidt, thank you again for being a part of this. Just to get people up to speed, you have had a long history with ICE, with Immigrations and Customs Enforcement there in Dodge County. How far back does that go, and what has the coordination been like between your sheriff's office and that organization?
Well, actually, we've had a relationship with the U.S. Marshals Service, and the immigration has been a rider on that agreement. And so we house immigration detainees as part of that U.S. Marshal contract. And it's been a very positive experience for me during my time as sheriff. We've had immigration detainees, U.S. Marshal inmates, other federal inmates from across the country here since during my tenure and beyond. I believe it started right around 2001. We're here in Dodge County. We've had that. It's been a very positive experience. Really has not yielded any negatives for our community in any way. We treat ICE as any other law enforcement entity as they are. Here in Dodge County.
Sheriff, I understand that what you operate there is the only ICE detention facility in the state of Wisconsin. Is that right?
Yeah, we're the only one to our size. There are other sheriff's offices that do house some immigration detainees for a short period of time, but we are the only one that holds them for a longer period of time.
With that as a backdrop, I'd be curious, much of what we've talked about in the last couple days and what has already come out in testimony during the trial has been the change, the sort of ramp up of arrests and enforcement during the early months of the Trump administration's second term in office, and some of the policy changes in January when President Donald Trump retook the White House, and then the further enforcement that we saw with different arrests at the Milwaukee County Courthouse, certainly this one that happened back in April. Has there been a noticeable change in the numbers on your end of things in this year, the first year of the Trump administration's second term?
There's been no change at all. And in fact, we're actually a little bit down from where we were earlier in the year. Our facility has been full to the immigration and U.S. Marshal standards as long as I can remember. Under President Obama, under President Biden, we actually had more people within our facility than we do right now from immigration. So it really is, it's been a constant for us.
How does that score? I'm sorry, not to interrupt you, but continue.
We've seen additional communication and contact from them, and it's been easier to get things done with them right now because it's more of a focal point, but really has been no change for us.
How does that square with, I think the impression is that the Trump administration has ramped up immigration enforcement. Is it that other areas of the country, places maybe like Chicago or others or closer to the border, are seeing more of that than here in Wisconsin? Or is it just not the case that there have been, tell me about it, because I think the expectation would be you would have seen some huge increase in an influx in arrests.
Well, my point is that we've always had immigration enforcement, and I've always been full. I can't build a new building and add room for additional detainees and inmates in my jail. I just don't have any additional room. Yeah, they would love to put more people here, but I don't have any room for it. My point is that this is continued. This isn't something new that all of a sudden we're doing immigration enforcement in the United States. We have done a lot of immigration enforcement. We've done a lot of deportations in our country throughout the years, and it is more of a focus under the Trump administration, no doubt. And places are seeing it where they hadn't before. But that doesn't mean that it hadn't been going on already under these prior administrations with the support of those prior administrations and presidents.
Still, certainly the attention on this trial and going back to the arrest of Judge Dugan back in the spring gained national attention for this part of southeastern Wisconsin, for Milwaukee specifically here. I want to play a clip with you with one of our legal experts, Julius Kim, who's joined us throughout our coverage of this, is a frequent expert that we use during high-profile trials like this, about the possible impact of a verdict. So if you don't mind, this was from the 9 p.m. news last night. Our anchor asked him, Again, we're very early. We don't know which way this trial is going to go, but about the possible impact, depending which way the verdict could go, and then I'd be interested in your response to that. But let's play the clip first so you can hear it.
Could this case truly have ripple effects for the rest of the country, the decision?
Yeah, I think it could, because I think that it could lend a little bit of guidance for judges. They could feel a little bit more at ease knowing that they can use some of their discretion and they're not automatically going to get prosecuted. Well, who knows? They might, but at least that there is a system in place where jurors can recognize that they might not be overreaching per se when they're trying to just make sure that the system is going safely. And if there is a not guilty verdict here, then that might have the administration at this point in time rethink some of their tactics and strategies.
So it's a little bit of an either-or answer there from Julius Kim again, but I think it plays into what we're already hearing a lot in court during this first day and a half so far, Sheriff Schmidt. When it comes to the unknowns, and especially going back to April of this year, it seems like at Milwaukee County, the courthouse, there was kind of an unclear idea of what judges were supposed to do, how immigration agents were supposed to come into a county courthouse like that. What was your response to that answer and kind of the larger issues that have come up already in this trial?
First of all, I don't know that I necessarily buy the argument that a judge didn't know what to do when all of this started. I personally think, my own opinion is that Judge Dugan knew exactly what she was doing, and knew that it was likely not, even if it wasn't illegal, it wasn't the most ethical thing to do. To actively assist someone in evading a law enforcement arrest, to me, ethically, is not appropriate. And so I'm certainly waiting to see what the result of this trial is. But at the end of the day, in a county that we pride ourselves on making sure we hold people accountable, I think it leads to a safer environment if we also hold those accountable who are holding other people accountable, and hold them to the same standard. I think that's important. If a not guilty verdict comes out, I don't know that the administration is going to change course. I would venture to guess that the administration is going to disagree, and they'll continue on course with the enforcement actions that they've already have in place. And I in Dodge County will continue to support those efforts. And if an immigration officer comes into Dodge County and needs assistance, here in Dodge County, we're going to help them.
Sheriff Schmidt, I'm a big data guy and I like to look for data. It's hard to find sometimes localized data on immigration enforcement, but an organization called Track Immigration actually does open records requests, gets some of this in, and I was able to parse out some Wisconsin data. And to what you said a moment ago about not seeing an increase, tell me if these numbers sound similar or at least close to right. But they show the Dodge County Jail having in September of each year, these are date specific, but in September of, say, 2023, there were 117 of these immigration detainees in custody of the Dodge County Jail, 116 September of last year and 109 September of this year. Does that sound about right to you? And it does actually seem to underscore what you said about there not being any sort of dramatic increase that you've seen.
Yeah, those numbers seem very close to accurate. I mentioned yesterday when we were in the morning show, I'm talking about our actual bed days. And if you were to actually look at this year's bed days in Dodge County compared to last year's bed days, we are on pace to be approximately 1,800 bed days less than we were in 2024. And that's specifically just for those immigration detainees in my jail. And if you look back to 2014, prior to my time here as sheriff, we actually had about 25 to 30,000 more bed days of immigration detainees in the jail, and that was under President Obama. So to give you some additional data to support what you're talking about here, this has been going on for a very long time. It's not anything new because President Trump is here that we're finally deporting people.
Well, one of the new things,
more attention.
Sheriff, one of the new things seems to be the focus on courthouse arrests, which they've been allowed, but under very limited circumstances. President Trump's policy opened it up to more, and Eduardo Flores Ruiz was one example of that. I'm wondering, outside of Milwaukee County, I know you represent the Badger State Sheriff's Association. You have a long history there. Are sheriff's departments, are other county jails, or are other counties seeing some of these courthouse arrests as well, or has this just been a Milwaukee thing? What have you seen? Excuse
me, this is not just a Milwaukee County thing. We've had arrests here in our jail in Dodge County. I can't really speak on behalf of others around the state. I haven't had that conversation, but immigration has worked with my court security staff in the past when they know somebody is here appearing that they're not supposed to be in our country, and they have the full assistance of the Dodge County Sheriff's Office, and they've made a number of arrests here. And it really goes back to accountability. And these individuals broke the law when they came into our country. And our immigration folks are working their best to make sure that they can hold these individuals accountable. And that's exactly what they're doing. And a courthouse is a safe setting to do that. They're not out on the street. They're not out on a traffic stop. They're in a controlled environment with backup already there, and in an area where typically we can make these arrests without incident, and here in Dodge County, walk them right next door and book them into the jail. So I think there's a misnomer that it potentially could be more dangerous. I don't see that at all. It's much more controlled, and yes, I am seeing it in other locations. Now you hear things about going into schools and things like that. I haven't seen any of that. But a courthouse is a court of law. And if our law enforcement folks can't go into a court of law to enforce the law, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
Let me ask you just the follow-up to that, and I think we discussed it yesterday, but likely a new audience here in the afternoon as well. But some of the counter-argument from folks on the other side would be, well, the courthouses, in some sense, have to respect and appreciate the criminal justice system, where if people have that fear that they could be arrested for an immigration-related offense at the courthouse, maybe they don't come forward as a witness in a crime. Maybe they don't come forward as a victim in a crime necessarily. Now, in this case, it's separate. Eduardo Flores Ruiz was the defendant and ultimately pled to the charges that he faced in that case. But do you see that side of the argument, that there could be an impact on the larger criminal justice system if there is a fear of people coming to courthouses either as victims or to testify as witnesses?
There's a lot of what ifs there. And I don't necessarily think that I'm not going to play the what if game. I see we have a lot of people who do cooperate with us, who are here illegally, and they do give statements. In fact, I get requests all the time to authorize what's called a U visa to allow people to stay in the country because they've been a victim of a crime. I'm here to tell you, in Dodge County, just because you're a victim of a crime doesn't mean I'm going to approve that. But that just shows me they know what my stance is on accountability. They've come to our courthouse. They've been witnesses, and they still continue to participate in the criminal justice system. You might have an off case here and there, but I don't see that as being a major issue in our country. You're coming to a courthouse. You have to expect that you're going to be held accountable. And as Secretary Noem has indicated, it's best to turn yourself in rather than let us catch you at home and elsewhere. And what better way to turn yourself in than come to the courthouse and and take that process, get that process moving.
Sheriff, I think it was interesting you described what's happening in Dodge County in terms of the Sheriff's Department. ICE has the full support of the Sheriff's Department cooperation, and I'm not sure if that applies to the judges there as well. Obviously, a different picture from what we saw in this case in Milwaukee County, where you have the courts saying we don't want to cooperate with ICE or we don't want to be an agent of ICE, and ICE came into this operation saying we didn't expect really to get that sort of assistance. I'm wondering, in Dodge County, when you go to do this, are you getting the full assistance of the courthouse and the court staff, or is there anyone there who says we don't want to see this in the courthouse?
Well, I've certainly had that question come up from the judges. Not that they necessarily disagree, but they are looking at both sides, as they should. And they've asked that those type of operations not happen in the courtroom itself. But a courthouse is a public building, open to the public. And an immigration officer coming into the courthouse to do operations is no different than going into any other public building. And so when I explained that to the judges here in Dodge County, they understood it. We simply have an arrangement in place where I've communicated with ICE and said, well, yes, you have the ability to go into a courtroom right now to do that. Let's keep it outside the courtroom. Let's keep it in the common areas of the courthouse, so that the judges don't have to get into a position where they restrict who can come in and out of their courtroom. And so there's certainly questions being asked, which I ask questions just as the judges should. We need to have a full understanding of it. I wouldn't say that they're not participant. I wouldn't say that they're participating members. They're still trying to keep the scales of justice in mind and do their job as impartially as possible. They leave that to me as the sheriff, and I'm responsible for the security of the courthouse. And so it's worked very, very well, and we just keep it out of the courtrooms.
It's interesting perspective, certainly in good comparison to what's happening in Dodge County versus what is or is not happening in Milwaukee County that has led us to this day. Sheriff Dale Schmidt, thank you again for all of the time here on the Wisconsin Live Desk.
My pleasure, and have a Merry Christmas, everybody.
Same to you. We'll take a couple